Welcome to the video lesson on skill set 7. I'm going to talk about working backwards. To do this lesson, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to review with you how to find part of a percent and then apply it to a whole percent. Here's where we get these awesome production values where I start twisting my phone around. And I'll get you to a specific region on the board here. And there we are. Okay, so first we're going to talk about finding part of a percent and applying it to a whole percent. Don't worry about the stuff in this area here, that's applying to the next question. Now first, I remember when I first was working a job, I was really excited. I thought I was going to make about $1,200, and then I got my check and it was about $856 or something like that. And I went home and I went, oh right, there's all these deductions. The tax is gone, the Canadian pension plan is gone, the employment insurance is gone, right? So let's say that we only know this. My check is $856. Well, let's say that 30% was deducted in taxes. I now know that 70% is $856. What I'm trying to figure out is exactly how much did my employer pay me before deductions. To do this kind of a problem, first what I'm going to do, I'm going to figure out if this is 70%, what is 1%? Or what that means, I'm going to divide it, we'll say that I did this into 70 little pieces. So one of these pieces here is 1% of my salary. So I'm saying I'm going to take $856 and I'm going to cut it into 70 pieces. 70% to 1%. So I'm going to do 856 divided by 70. If I take 856 divided by 70, I'm going to get this number here. I don't know if it's clear or not, but that number is 12.29. So that means 12.29 is 1% of my salary. If I know 1% of my salary, how do I find 100%? I times it by 100. So since I know 1% of my salary, I'm going to times it by 100. Times it by 100 is 1229. That means my employer paid me $1,229. This explains, I thought I was going to make about $1,200. I only made $856. A third was taken off for taxes, or 30%. 856 divided by 70% gave me 1% of my salary. 1% of my salary times 100 equals 100% of my salary, or $1,229. So now that we know how to take a part of a percent and apply it to 100%, we're going to take a look at the problem-solving assignments. Right here it says in the school library, 40% of the books are science books, 80% of the remaining books are English books, and the remaining 240 books are math books. What is the total number of books in the library? Now this does it all with numbers. I like to draw pictures, so I'm going to bring you in on how I draw pictures of this. I highly advise that you have your assignment beside you as I go through this, as then you can refer back and forth to the numbers while I show it to you on the board. So we have a school library. Now the first thing, it said 40% of the books are one kind and 80% of the books are the other. And Johnny says, Mr. Ewart, that's impossible. You can't have 120%. And I agree. I agree with you 110%, Johnny, just to make a really bad teacher joke. But we're not talking about 127%. It said 40% of the books.
Could all the grade 8s from Mr. Key's room please come down with your stuff
are science.
Ready to go except for...
It says that 80% of the remaining books, 80% of the remaining books are English books. So let's draw a second total. We've eliminated the science books, and it looks like 80% of the remaining books are English books. So we've now accounted for 40%, 80% of those that are remaining. We now have this small group of books left, and it says that the small groups remaining, there are 240 of them, and those are math books. The question is, how many books are there in the library? Well, to do this, we have to work backwards. We know that this number is 240. We know that this number is 20% of this number. We know that this number is 60% of this number. So let's start working backwards. Hold on, I'm just going to end the head bobbing from my camera. I have 240. So I know this number is 240. But I don't know what percent this number is. Well, if I look, 100% minus 80% equals 20. So I know that 20% of this number is 240. So how do I apply this to the whole thing? Well, what if I cut this in 20 pieces? I would find out what 1% of that number is. I'm going to cut this into 20 pieces. If I divide this by 20, I'm going to get 12. So 1% is 12 books. Well, if 12 books is 1% of this number, then 12 times 100 equals how many books are in this number? Well, that's 1,200. So that means 1,200 books are remaining once we've removed the science books. Well, 1,200, 100% minus 40% is 60%. That must mean 1,200 books is 60% of all the books in the library. So I'm going to cut this into 60 pieces. I'm going to cut it or divide it into 60 pieces. And I'm going to find what my total is. Let's see. 1,200 divided by 60 equals 20 books. So 20 books is equal to 1% of the total number of books in the library. Well, if 20%, or 20 books is 1%, then 20 times 100 equals 100% of the books. There are 2,000 books in this library. So we're going to take what we just learned, and we're going to apply this to the next question, because the next question brings it one step further. Now, I trust you have the assignment beside you. If you don't have the assignment, if you are absent, you can always download it off of the blog right there. So I'm going to trust that you're reading that, and I'm going to put this on the board itself. Here we go. Shane spent 30% of his salary on a cell phone. 30% on a cell phone. It says he then spent 40% of the balance to take a trip. The balance is what is left after he has deducted that cell phone. So 40% of this is his trip. Then it says of the remaining, or what he has left after all of that, 1/3 of it is, what is it, $252. It's $252. The question is, what's his monthly salary? Well, let's take a look. I guess this times 3 would equal this. So that times 3 is 756. So that means this is 756. That's part of his balance. How big a part of his balance? Well, 100% minus the 40% we already know. That's 60% of his balance. So this equals 60% of the balance after the cell phone. Once we know that, well, if I divide that into 60 pieces, I'll know what 1% is. And I will find that it is 126. Well, if I know what 126 is 1% of this number, well then 126 times 100 equals 100% of that number. So we've now figured out that we've got, oh, did I put, oh, sorry, this was supposed to be a decimal right there. That was where I made my mistake. If I know that 12.6 books is 1%, then 12.6 times 100 equals 1,260. So that means this is 1,260. Well, what percent is this? Well, 100% minus 30%, that means it's 70%. So I now know that the total of Shane's salary, 70% of it is this. So I'm going to divide that by 70. That tells me that 1% of his salary is 18. Well, if 1% of his salary is $18, then 100% of his salary is $1,800. So a quick review. He spent 30% on his cell phone. The new balance, 40% went towards a trip. What was remaining? A third of it was $252. 3 times 252 is 60% of his balance after the cell phone. Cut this in 60 times 100, you get 100% of the balance. The balance was 1,260. That's 70%. So we cut that into 70, found out 1% is 12.6 times 100 equals $1,800.